The difference between a phaser and a flanger. That is the question we'll be answering in today's video. Both phasers and flangers are time-based effects. So essentially you have a signal, be it a guitar or a piano, it goes into the unit, and then it divides into two different signals, right? One will keep going as the same signal, and the other will go as the second signal, but be time shifted a bit, thus creating the flanging or phasing effect. But before we get into the differences between phasers and flangers, let's take a step back and try to understand why this effect was even ever created. So years ago, before computers and DAWs and all that, we just recorded to tape, reel to reels. I'm sure you guys have seen it if you've seen old videos, or if you're an older guy like myself, you might even worked on one. Anyway, they didn't really have a lot of effects units. They really didn't have any effects units. If you wanted reverb, you had to record it in a chamber in another room. If you wanted delay, you actually had to make the delay. And the same thing went for this flanger phaser effect. So what they would do is they take two tape machines together, right? And they'd copy the tape so it's the same exact thing. Then they'd press play on the first one and then press play on the second one really quickly after, and then start lining it up. And you could get a different effect depending on how fast or slow behind the tape was running. So this would create a sort of comb filter effect, which is later kind of known as phasing or flanging. Now, I'm sure as you can guess, this was a real pain in the butt to do. It was hard to line them up. It was never perfect. You had to get 3 guys to do it. It was no fun. So depending on who you ask, most will say Eventide was the first company to come out with a box that would actually create the phaser effect. And shortly thereafter, the flanger box came out as well. Now, this is where we can kind of talk about the differences between a phaser and a flanger. Now, the phaser box uses 8 all-pass filters at different frequencies to create the effect we all know as a phaser. The flanger does it evenly across frequencies with a delay line, which sometimes sounds a bit smoother, and maybe the reason why we tend to use a flanger more than a phaser when we're looking for that kind of sound. So now that we understand how the effects work, let's get into some sound examples so we can hear the differences between the two. So I thought what plugin would be better to use than Eventide's original instant flanger and instant phaser for the examples. Now, these work a little differently than the original model, obviously. What's cool about the Eventide version is you have different kinds of phasers or flangers you can use. You can use an oscillator, remote, which is through MIDI, the manual, and then an envelope version. Now, the original one should have been the oscillator version, so that's what we'll use here. The way you change the speed is with this oscillator through different hertz, and we'll listen to the differences. I got this at 25, so it sounds about the same as our phaser, or flanger, sorry. The flanger, kind of same kind of thing as the unit. You have different versions you can use. You have a feedback version. The feedback you can turn on off. You have the manual, oscillator, remote, and envelope here. This is where the rate is on this one, and this is kind of, you know, can turn the effect up or down. What's really cool about both these units that obviously the originals did not have is this sync switch. So if you want to, you can sync it with the song you're working on. So that's a whole nother video probably, but just so you guys quickly kind of understand how these two units work. So for this example right now, we have the oscillator at 0.25 hertz here, and we have it at 0.25 hertz here. And the way this plugin also works as far as it's a mix knob, which obviously you can't do this effect without some sort of mix knob. They call it depth. 100% is half and half evenly. 0 is all the way the second signal, like we talked about, the second signal, not the dry, the wet one. It doesn't really sound, it sounds a little pitchy, that's about it, because there's no wet one for it to phase or flange. But we'll do this at 100% here, and we'll do it 100% here. So let's get into some examples. I have this little guitar line. It's really simple and probably going to be annoying after a while, but I figured it was easy if it keeps repeating. So what I'll do is I'll play the clean version first, as you can see over here. And then I'm going to mute that and go to the phaser, and then mute that and go to the flanger, so we can get an understanding of the different sounds. So you can hear there's quite a bit of difference. To me, almost the flanger sounds a little more like of an effect than the phaser does in this instance. But I think if we change the oscillator, let's go up to say 90 1 hertz, right? Let's hear what they sound like now. So you can tell the phaser's moving a lot more, getting more whooshier now as we turn it up, turn the effect up. The flanger sounds a bit stronger, but still kind of sounds the same as the beginning. And that's what you'll kind of notice. That's one of the key differences, in my opinion, between phasers and flangers is a phaser and a flanger at a low volume or low oscillation will sound, the phaser will sound not as effective as the flanger. But as you turn it up, it switches and the flanger becomes, still kind of stays the same, but works, and the phaser gets more far out, as you will. So let's crank these up a bit more and see what it sounds like. So we are at 20 hertz here now. So let's start from the top. So you hear the differences, quite dramatic with the phaser. Phaser gives you kind of this like Led Zeppelin sound of a, there was one record they have, and maybe one of you guys know in the comments below, gives you that kind of Led Zeppelin sound that was on some of the guitars of their songs. Makes sense because that's right around when this came out. Flanger's still doing its thing, but you know, you could use this on drums or whatever, and it would be a cool effect to kind of bring in and out, where the phaser at this level is more like we're using this as effect or not. So there you have it, guys, some differences between the phaser and the flanger. Both really cool effects and both different. You know, a lot of times we just kind of think of them as the same, but as you heard in the examples, you can really do a lot of different things with them. We only kind of scratched the surface of that, but you know, it's up to you to take these effects and try to, you know, manipulate them on your own. Let me know what you guys think about phasers and flangers in the comments below. How are you using them? They're really great on vocals too. I use flangers on vocals quite a bit at low levels. If you need your songs mixed or mastered, hit me up at mixandmastermysong.com. You can find my presets and courses there too. Talk to you soon.